Taking minutes, good?
Yes.
Sweet.
It also gets recorded, so.
This is gonna be fun. Doing sales, gonna get my steps in.
You good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. It's 7:02 on Thursday, December 18th, 2025. The Wilton Board of Education regular meeting is called to order. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So.
Thank you, Lori. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pat. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Comments from the public. Are you able
Yeah,
to?
I'll go see.
Okay, go see. The board has set aside time at the beginning and end of regular meetings for public comments for members of the public to share their views on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform the board's decisions on such matters. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to any one subject. For the record, please also give your name and address. The board considers the views of citizens in its deliberations and welcomes and appreciates public comment. The board listens to public comment thoughtfully and with interest. The board, however, generally does not respond to public comment during board meetings by offering commentary or answering questions. The board also invites commentators and the public to contact the board or the superintendent directly with any specific questions or comments. Are there any comments from the public?
There are no takers.
Thank you. Consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the minutes from the December 4th organizational meeting and also then the December 4th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Pat. Is there a second? Thank you, Pam. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. That was, board chair's report. I just woke up this morning and, doing the regular things you do, and all of a sudden I realized this is our last meeting before the end of the year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we get here already? And our next first meeting in the new year will be budget. So I just wanted to take a minute to say, recently we've been reminded that the world can be a dark place. And also that the holidays are a time of light, from menorahs to Christmas decorations to football games played under lights. And teaching and learning is also a practice grounded in light. It's a search for truth, meaning, and understanding. And as a mother of 3 in the schools and a board member, I'm grateful to our community's commitment to education and light. And I'm grateful for all the teachers and staff members who walk through our doors every day and bring light to our children and our community. And I wish everyone a bright, light-filled holiday and a restorative and joy-filled season and a healthy and prosperous new year.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you very much. Great, I'll just add 2 points of light to that. Jory sent a note earlier this week. The first LEGO League Robotics State Championship took place in Glastonbury last weekend on December 13. Out of 150 teams at the regional qualifiers, 48 teams and 2 from Wilton advanced to the state event. One team called Allied Algorithms won, so they're the state champions. Yeah, how about that? The second
How cool
team
is that?
awesome, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, so the second team, they were in 27th overall and won the Motivation Award for team spirit and display of enthusiasm. So another really great showing for Wilson students.
Very nice.
Pretty great.
Okay, then the financial report, please.
So spending at this point is about where we would expect it to be for this time of year. The areas that we continue to watch are the same ones we always continue to watch. Utilities, special education, and health insurance. So far utilities are about where we expected them to be. As has been previously mentioned, we have a few more students who are higher cost. So we had adjusted what we were anticipating our excess cost was going to be this week, yesterday actually. They did come out with the preliminary numbers, which is higher than what I had put on the spreadsheet. So I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
I had cautious optimism.
But you know, until the money is in the bank, you never really know what we're going to end up with. We did meet with our insurance broker last week to review our health insurance costs year to date, and to discuss our preliminary projections for our budget. So far, our claims are trending close to what we were projecting, so we're not feeling like anything's out of line. And actually, compared to a lot of the state, our insurance broker feels that we were in a much better place than a lot of other districts. So
What did we estimate about, like 6-7%? Is that what we had?
we're figuring right now it'll probably be about a 7% increase next year. As a follow-up to the conversation concerning the denied insurance claim that we had filed for the failed high school rooftop unit that caused the smoke in the cafeteria during the convocation, the unit was not covered because it was 25 years old and basically at its end of life. Luckily, the failure did not cause any other damage in the building, so there were no other expenses besides fixing the fan. And we did fix the unit. It was about $21,700. And I just mentioned that because we had discussed it previously, but also it also speaks to the fact that a lot of our facilities are aging, and so we do end up with these unexpected costs, which then do put additional pressure on the budget. So as we continue to move forward with replacing things, we just want to make sure that we're moving in a positive direction.
And so just to correct me if I'm wrong, for we would have to have that a deductible too, right? So
Yeah, it would have been a $10,000 deductible.
Okay. And then is it our insurance policy that I know as a homeowner you get kind of the remaining value? So even if it had been like, let's say 20 years old, they wouldn't have would they have given you what they think is the useful life?
Right, so
left?
when the insurance looks at it, there's two different pieces, right? So they would be looking at the unit itself, and like you said, they would probably prorate it based on what they figure it was worth. It's not worth anything, so they weren't gonna fix it. But if there had been damage that was done as a result of the failure of the unit, then that would be a separate thing that would then also be covered. But luckily, because we were all in the building, there was no damage, so.
And that would have been a separate claim though? If there
It would have been part of the same claim, but there's two different pieces to it.
Okay, so it's just in general though, just in thinking about our unit, our things being at end of life. So if we had damage, could we have gotten reimbursed for the damage absent it being reimbursed for the machine itself?
It would be ultimately it would be up to the insurance company whether they were gonna cover it or not, but generally speaking, I think that it probably would have been covered. But typically they won't cover the piece that failed.
Okay, but they would typically cover the resulting damage if there had been.
Yeah.
Do we have a lot of end-of-life things?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's on our agenda for today.
We're working.
We're working our way through them, but
Through the end-of-life things? Okay.
We'll have a brand new rooftop unit over at Middlebrook at some point later this year. We'll have another one here next summer. So we're,
yeah.
plotting forward.
So it's a matter of prioritizing, but there was for a time, and Kevin could better speak to this because he has more of the history, but there was for a time where things were not being replaced when they should have been. And so we're kind of behind the eight ball right now, hence the reason why we have the larger expenses that are now going to be coming up. But we need to make sure that we're continuing to move forward.
And so is this, I guess the one thing that stood out to me was you called out that this was basically not, had zero value, but then we fixed it. Is that because it is part of a replacement program that we're going to talk about in a year or so anyway?
This
or?
was unanticipated.
No,
Yeah, it was unanticipated, they reconditioned the unit, so now it's no longer at its end of life. It's a fan unit, so it's part of a larger piece of equipment, which eventually the whole piece of equipment will need to be fixed, but in the meantime, we needed it to be operational so that there was air movement in the cafeteria.
Yeah, I think I understand Mark's question, saying like, if it was 25 years old, when was it scheduled kind of to be replaced? Is that,
Exactly.
yeah,
Like if we're
yeah.
gonna,
Yeah, right, so we have to look at this, it's on, I know it's on,
is the
it's
goal
on
just
the
to buy us 6
schedule.
months, or we're trying to buy 6 years of this repair? So I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's closer to 6 years than 6 months.
Okay.
Any other questions for,
Yeah, I just had a couple. It looks like we're at 100% use of budget on transportation services and vehicle repair.
Yeah, so
Is that because we prepay transportation services?
yeah, we haven't prepaid it, but we do have it encumbered because we know what
Okay.
that cost is gonna be.
Okay.
So because we already have it encumbered, that's why it looks like we've already spent it, but there's a separate line on there. One is what's encumbered and what's been paid year to date.
Yep.
And if you add the two of them together,
Got
that's
it.
why it's showing exactly percent.
Okay.
And there's a few areas that are like,
So the total, sorry, because I'm the new guy, but the total transactions, that's the encumbrance?
the encumbrance is what's left to be paid. So yeah, if you.
Oh, sorry, you did encumbrance, I see
Yeah.
it, this separate column, got it. So the total is just encumbrance plus actual, and you did it before.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think this isn't really a question for you, Lila, but the Downer psychologist at Cider Mill, is that vacancy filled now? How long has it been open for? Does this cover a period of time that's already passed?
you look at the transfer.
Yeah, so,
I'll cover that, yeah.
no, so this, so it's year to date, so we haven't filled the vacancy, we're covering with an agency we have a temp psychologist coming in on an as-needed basis to do testing. So that's so we're drawing from that individual salary line.
It's a hard position to fill.
We just hired a second Miller Driscoll, and just got lucky this time of year.
Yeah, so we just need to get lucky again.
Yes.
Any other questions for Lila or Kevin on the financials? Thank you very much. I will, let me say that if you don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting, that's perfectly okay. You should,
okay, thank you.
take some of your. If you want to hear the facilities discussion, that's fine, but after that, if you want to take your leave for the evening, you should feel free to do that.
I'm just moving to be closer to the machine so I can click, and you. Okay, so this is a slightly amended presentation from the one that I provided last night to the built-in capital planning committee. The only change is this very first slide, and I actually should have picked it up in their presentation last night. What I wanted to do with this deck is just capture all of the items on the recommended capital projects that touch the Board of Ed. And so this is part of, an ongoing paving project. And so that's what you're looking at here. So Frank had presented this a couple of weeks ago to that committee, but just so for your information, so you have it, when we're looking at all of the proposed projects for fiscal 27 that touch the Board of Ed, the paving project would be one of them. So the way that this kind of slide deck works is you have the project and then the financial details behind it. The next one is the ongoing roof replacement project. So this is the first of 3 sections of roofing that need to be replaced at Cider Mill. And so this section, you'll recall, you've heard a lot about the leaks in the media center over there. So this roof replacement covers that section of the media center, in addition to lots of other sections of the building. So each year when we do bonding, we have a roofing project, and so it's just ongoing. So this summer we're doing roofing and some rooftop units here. If this bond is adopted, next summer we would do, Cider Mill Part A, and then we would Part B, and then B after that, and then 4 years out we'd be moving on to high school. This next one is a major renovation project. And so most of you anyway, know the story here. So back in the fall of '23, the town commissioned KG&D to do a complete facilities study. And so Eric Kyer, who actually lives here in town, is the principal who put that study together. And he generated a very lengthy list of items that total, somewhere around $100 million. And so some of the early thinking in responding to that was to try to tick off some of those items. He had categorized them priorities 1, 2, and 3. Priorities 1 being things that needed immediate repair, like leaking roofs, failed mechanical units, etc. Priority 2, kind of less important but need to be updated. And then priority 3, less important still. So that certainly made sense to think about those projects, but when we got into it, and the first test case was last summer when we were renovating the Peterson wing, as we got into it, and we were running into some challenges, what became very apparent is that while it's important to address priority 1 and 2 items as soon as possible, there were some priority 3 items that made no sense to defer. And so, I think the simple example is we ripped out the ceilings and we're replacing all the ductwork. The ductwork was priority 1, the ceilings and the lighting were priority 3. And so to follow on that priority 1, 2, 3 schedule made no sense. So it made more sense to combine those projects and to deal with a section of a building geographically. And so after lots and lots of conversation, we've kind of altered our process here in our proposal about how we're going to suggest dealing with these buildings going forward. And so we're thinking, geographically more than priority 1, 2, 3. And so that's why we started with the Peterson wing, where we have some unexpended bonds fund remaining. So we're continuing to do some flooring, painting, ceiling tile work because the money's available. That's what the bond was for, and it makes sense to continue that. So right now, as we speak, 6 green flooring is being replaced. Those rooms are being painted. We'll replace the ceiling tiles and the lighting this summer, and then we'll move on to the next section of the building. In trying to prioritize projects, because there are so many, thinking about the buildings and all of the work that needs to be done, it also made sense to try to finish either the less expensive projects or the smaller projects before we move on to major projects. And so thinking about how we sequence, this whole entire high school needs to be redone. So prior to getting to that, there's been some consensus around it. Let's finish Middlebrook because we started at Middlebrook. We've got some exterior and interior work to do at Cider Mill. Cider Mill was already touched once 6 years ago, and so the work is not as expansive. So let's try to finish Cider Mill, and then we have 2 virtually complete and renovated buildings, and then let's fully turn our attention to the high school. So that's why these projects are laid out the way they are. The last piece just on this before I get into what this is, you'll see, if you haven't seen it already, the number for a virtually complete renovation of Middlebrook is slightly north of $20 million. I'm not anticipating the town's going to propose a $20 million bond to get this work done in this year, but we wanted to make sure we captured the full scope of the project, and so we keep that in front of us as a priority. We re-engaged with Eric Kyer to walk through the building and to update the needs assessment from '23 and to capture it in a single proposal. And so that's what you have in front of you. On this slide deck, I broke it down into kind of just two pieces. One is really all of the interior work, and so that includes flooring, ceiling tiles, lighting, painting, classroom upgrades, so furniture, teaching surfaces. The technology is really just updating the wiring in the ceiling. So we have, I think, Cat 5, and we want to update it to Cat 6. And so the total cost of doing that throughout the building is what you see at the bottom. The estimated cost is $13,400,000. What's not included there is the cost for abatement, and so that's got to be added to that. So there'd be a slight increase in that number. Jose was still getting those numbers, and there's not a huge amount of square footage that needs to be abated, but that a small section within the media center, a section of the hallway in the original section of the building. So we're not talking about the entire school building, but some sections of the original building have asbestos and the mastic in the flooring tile. The remaining work at Middlebrook is the exterior work. And so that would be, sidewalk, repair, replacement, stairs on the backside where necessary, handrails where necessary. There's some brick that needs to be repointed, some metal siding that needs to be replaced. And then, I think more importantly, the doors and windows. We have a lot of exterior doors in that building that are past the end of their life. The casings are rotted out at the bottoms, and so, those are fairly urgent. And then sealant around, windows. And so that total cost there was $8.6 million to do all of the exterior work. The only item that we didn't include in this proposal was the concept of building new bathrooms at the auditorium. That's been a topic, there's a need there, but that was additional construction, and so we just set that aside. And there's also been discussion of adding air conditioning to the auditorium, and so at some point we'll have to talk about that, but just so you understand what's in this, those two pieces were not included. In Eric's work, he kind of laid it out geographically and color-coded it, and so a lot of what you see in the purple, certainly on the left-hand side, most of that work has been completed, minus bathroom renovations, minus updating furniture, minus updating the cabling and the ceilings to operate the technology in the classrooms. On the far side, Group A at the top of that drawing, that's the 6 green wing, so we're working there now, and we hope to work our way through 7 green, which would be the remaining purple right in the middle top there, later this winter. And then if there are any remaining funds after that, we would just try to push forward. So you can see, the categories, within those color-coded areas are, essentially the same. These are the costs associated with each of those pieces. In the cost estimates, Eric did account for the work that was already bonded. And so, while he's got the cost there, if you look at the total, if you're trying to, add across the, the subtotal bottom row, he's already factored in work that's been, bought and paid for. Moving on from Middlebrook, the next set of recommendations are Cider Mill, and so the exterior envelope of Cider Mill needs to be addressed. Some of these items were priority 1 items in that 23 KGB facility study. So brick repointing, there's cracks in the masonry, curtain wall needs to be repaired. Similar to Middlebrook, we need to replace exterior doors, and then perimeter and expansion joints need to be resealed, and then there are some gutter leaks in various places around the building, and some lintels also need to be repaired. The total cost of all of that work was just about $2.7 million. I do have you can see in red, I have a question for Jeff Pardo that I haven't had answered yet, but there is an inclusion of air-cooled chillers. And so we're replacing the chiller this summer that's already been bonded. It's not clear to me if those other components that are included in that or not. And so if they're not, then that would have to be accounted for somewhere here. If they are, then, you know, we're good to go. And then the site work around Cider Mill. So this was, you know, primarily a priority 2 set of items. So concrete stairs on both the north and south side around leading into the original gym. There's sidewalks that need to be repaired or replaced. Exterior handrails. There's a retaining wall near the front entrance that needs to be repaired. And I've already mentioned doors and windows. The total cost there is just under $1 million for that work. So those are the sets of the kind of next set of priorities for us that we put in front of the town capital plan. I'll come back to you when we meet again in January with a 5-year look. And so the next set of priorities after this would be the remaining interior at Cider Mill, and then we move on to the high school. If you've been following the Town Capital Planning Committee, you know, there's been a lot of circular conversation and just a real challenge to try to move forward. And there are lots of, you know, really valid reasons for that. One of the recommendations I'm going to have for you, and I mentioned this to Ruth yesterday, and I'm going to ask a few of you to join me for a call in a couple of weeks when we get back from the break. But I think it would be in the board's best interest to contract with an owner's representative firm. And so there are companies in the world that, you know, basically serve as representatives for school districts. I had a conversation with a couple of gentlemen from Colliers, and they are right now working in Weston, in New Canaan, in Darien. They've done work in Ridgefield. They're working in Fairfield as well. And so, you know, they're a group of experts that help guide these major construction processes to ensure that bidding is done right and well. They interface with general contractors. They're experts in the state reimbursement process, which can be really Byzantine. And so recognizing the challenges that we have on the town side and just the kind of general lack of expertise, we'd probably be we would benefit from services like that. So what I thought we would do is arrange a call, generate some questions, and just explore that possibility. And then that might be something that we'll want to pursue as we're getting, you know, deeper into some of these projects.
Sounds like a good idea,
I think,
considering the town's kind of struggling with a lot of things.
yeah,
right
and
now.
as a community, we have a lot on our plate. So I have to take some questions on these, but I wanted you to have this information since it was presented already to the Town Capital Planning Committee, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Kevin, will we still have our own bonding process, or is it all gonna be combined for all the town capital projects?
Well, the town is the selectmen,
Right.
the body that has the authority to bond. The
Yeah.
Board of Ed doesn't, and so all of the projects, you know, funnel through them. You
Yeah.
know, so you've heard me say in the past, you know, we're renters, not owners.
Yeah.
And you know, statutorily, that's the reality. We generate the project proposals, but you know, it's a town responsibility.
And then what, at the town meeting, what is voted on for bonding is what is presented to the town by the Board of Selectmen.
What they prefer.
So we're 2 steps removed from that.
Yeah, and I think that's the intent of this capital planning committee, is to look at the entire universe of projects and then try to follow a process to make some prioritized recommendations.
Does a company like Colliers function as a project management team?
They'd be owners' representatives, so they'd be your rep working with the architect contractors, you know, that ultimately, you know, would be hired to do the work.
How would that fit with the town services?
Yeah, I mean, it's consulting services, right? So, I mean, there's still, you need, you know, town or board oversight people, employees here to interface with them for sure, and to collaborate on the expertise.
I think it lessens the burden, the day-to-day operational burden on the town employee side.
Yeah.
Sorry, would it though, because are they agents of the Board of Education or are they agents of the town if we hire them?
So they, I mean, if the Board of Ed hired them, they
Then
would
they would be agents of us, not of the town.
Yeah.
So the town, I'm not sure if the town would actually have less work, I don't know.
Well, I think if we're providing them with a person that has the expertise and the management capability, then it's more of it's not a direct responsibility on their part, the same as if there would be somebody who's on the ground on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't necessarily need to be a town employee.
Yeah, I think, I go back to the way that we kind of functioned this summer, and, Jeff Pardo was largely responsible for crafting all of the RFPs, for the daily engagement with all of the contractors and the subcontractors, for doing all of the follow-up. And so, while you wouldn't let all of that go, I think the majority would be, picked up by an owner's representative firm. And so in that respect, it would lighten the load. You certainly don't let go of your oversight responsibilities.
But they wouldn't get involved in non-school related projects.
No, I think the recommendation for me would be very specific to Board of Education projects, yeah.
And that would
So
be.
it would help facilitate that side of the town's.
Yeah.
Would we bid those services out?
Oh, yeah, I think you want to do that.
It's a potential path. It's a potential pathway, I think, because the town, sitting on the capital planning committee, I think there's a couple of, there's a resource capacity barrier, and then there's also a funding, barrier in terms of financing. So I think the more that we can help facilitate removing some of those barriers would go a long way to easing completion of the projects in front of us.
Yeah, so I think the next opportunity, for you and whoever would like to participate, I'll just set up a call, and so we'll kind of ask our questions, learn about the way the services work. I'll pick one firm that we can talk to, and then we'll have a sense of how the process works.
Just out of curiosity, the kind of the way this is, the Middlebrook and then the Cider Mill work set up, in terms of moving forward with Middlebrook interior, because we've already been, it's already halfway through and in progress. But then between the exterior work at Cider Mill versus the exterior work at Middlebrook, those are really, are those priorities interchangeable?
Yeah, they were listed, I have to go back and just verify, but they were in that initial KG&D study, they were, I think they were priority 1 and 2. And not each piece in all of the site work or all of the, exterior reno was 1 or 2. So it depended on what the piece was. One of the, Rich Santosky has been asking, similar question for more than a year now. But, he's looking at magnitude and, has said things like, well, if you're doing the pointing at Middlebrook, why don't you do all the pointing and maybe you get one vendor to do it all? Or if you're doing cement work at one school, why don't you do all the cement work and maybe you'll get a better price, if you increase the size of the project. I think that the other challenge with the town capital planning committee is just not really having a full sense of the bonding capacity right now. And so part of my rationale for presenting this in this way is $20 million is a large number. You can certainly break it up into smaller pieces, but we also have some other smaller projects. And so what I want to avoid is trying to do this work piecemeal. And so if there's only $1 million available, well, we have $1 million project, and that would, address substantively, one of the, significant projects. If you have $5 million.
That you can plug and play within the overall outline.
Yeah, and so that was, Rudy asked that question last night, if I was gonna rank order these, and I said, and I wasn't being jerky about it, but I just, again,
This all needs to be done.
yeah, it all needs to be done, and again, if we had a sense of, what dollars were available, I might have a different perspective, and, I think until we know that, that's going to strongly influence the conversation.
Right, but it's not a question of whether it needs to be,
No, it has to,
It all needs to be done.
yeah. And this isn't even the high school,
No.
which is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's all of that,
Plus, yeah,
times two.
yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Great. All right, anything else on this? So you have it, and lots more to come. Let me put your presentation. It's funky. You're gonna have to reach to.
Yeah, if I can sit over there.
Or would you want me? I can manually operate this slide.
No, that's okay, because I'm gonna skip around a bunch, so.
And just wanted to, this is Mark Shane, our newest member, our only new member, so for some of us, will be review, and for Mark, it'll be new.
Sure. How much time do I have?
Hours.
These guys are here all night.
Is this the last
Well,
thing on the agenda?
This is not like a Board of Ed meeting in other towns. We.
Yeah. We know that
Very
nothing good
excited,
happens
yeah.
after 9 o'clock, and
Okay.
I like to.
All right, so, but I'm your last item.
But you're
so
the
I can
last
take
item.
my
No.
time.
Oh,
All right.
actually, you know what? Do you wanna make a motion to put the calendar ahead?
Yeah, move
Let's-
the action.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to amend the agenda to put the action item revised 205 to 26 calendar next on the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Nicola. Is there a second? Thank you, Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. You have anything?
You want just the
Yeah.
calendar?
Mark graciously pointed out to us that in prior years, the meeting schedule had always gone the full calendar year, and somehow lately it got truncated to the school year. But under state law, we need to post the dates for the full year. So we revised the calendar to have, we always meet the first and third Thursday of the month. So now all the dates are in there and completed. While we were at it too, originally on the calendar that we had passed at the last meeting, our joint BOE-BOF meeting was going to be on February 12th. And now, after talking with the Board of Finance, we have changed it to Tuesday, February 10th, which is their regular meeting date. So that gives them one meeting in the week instead of two. And in addition to that, the budget workshops, we now have added what will be the topic of discussion at each budget workshop. Any questions on the revisions or the calendar? Is there a motion to approve the revised 25-26 Board of Education calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Pam. I'll take Loria's second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here again. I know all but one of you have been here, done that. So I'm gonna try to be nimble with this presentation. As I said to Mark at the beginning, some of the nuts and bolts I think you'll get from the CABE workshop when you take it. But I would suggest that we work backward and talk through some scenarios and do some nuts and bolts that way to keep it fresh for everybody else. However, I do always like to start with the pop quiz, which is, and those of you who have done this, you can help teach with me. And the pop quiz is this: what are your many roles and responsibilities as a Board of Education?
I can tell you what the Cape Handbook says.
Are you reading? Because that's cheating.
No, I'm not. it's policy, it's basically audit, and it's and then they said budget, but then they redefined budget as your most important policy, so it's really just policy and budget and audit.
Yeah, those are the two big ones. And so policy, why is policy so important to the Board of Education's work? What are board policies?
The policies are like set the overall tone and guidelines for the superintendent to then go ahead and achieve operationally. But it sets the tone and understanding about what as a community and what as a board we expect out of, the performance of the district.
Yes, that's exactly right. And actually, that's true of some of your policies. A lot of your policies come directly from the Connecticut state statutes, and they are required by law, and they actually are your laws. So they are the laws by which the board functions, and your superintendent, who is by law your chief executive officer, is responsible for implementing those laws. And some of those laws are very prescriptive and detailed. I'm calling them laws, but they're policies. Some of them are very general. Some of them that, as you, Ruth, said, set the tone might have one sentence, right, in them. And then how does your superintendent know how to implement those policies? Those that are very general or limited in their description of what he's supposed to do. Is anybody familiar with what comes with
In some
policies?
cases, we have regulations that are also on our books.
I'm sorry, say that
So
again.
in some cases, we have regulations that are tied to policies on our books.
Exactly. They're called administrative regulations, and those are the regulations that are adopted administratively. They are not necessarily passed by the board, although in some cases you may vote on regulations. Generally, I advise against it because they are supposed to be flexible, and they are supposed to indicate how your policies are implemented in the school. So yes, policies are very important because they not only set the tone for how your school district operates, but they're also required by law, and they are your laws. Budget, obviously a big one. I know you're in the middle of or about to begin budget season. And with budget, comes all the priorities that you're setting, maybe your strategic plan. There are actually a lot of other things that you all are responsible for doing. And I was just talking before about how the last time I saw Patrick was at what? Do you guys remember?
Oh, we had a hearing.
A grievance hearing.
Yes,
Hearing,
right.
Yes.
So you have what I like to call a quasi-judicial function. You all serve at times as a judge, collective judge. And sometimes that comes in the form of presiding over grievance hearings, which are hearings that come to you if there is an employee who has alleged that the administration or the board has violated the collective bargaining agreement applicable to the employees. And so it'll start with the administration and it may get appealed to the board. That particular type of hearing is interesting because it's more in the nature of negotiations or collective bargaining than it is in the nature of you're a judge who has to be impartial and the person on the other side gets due process. There are other hearings where you are truly a judge and you have to truly be impartial because the person on the other side has a federal constitutional 14th Amendment right to due process. So you can't really know anything about it before it actually comes to you because that could compromise your ability to be impartial. Does anybody know what I am referring to there?
Well, it could be an expulsion hearing.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a firing or discipline causation hearing.
Yes, so student expulsion, here in Wilton, you delegate that responsibility to an independent hearing officer, which many districts do. And so there are other reasons why you wouldn't or shouldn't know about those matters, namely the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, student privacy. And then, Ruth, as you alluded to, it's specifically termination proceedings related to specifically certified staff. Who are certified staff? Teachers and administrators. Anybody else who gets terminated could grieve that under the contract, but you're not the ones who would decide. You are the ones who would decide whether Kevin's recommendation to terminate a teacher or an administrator should be upheld. So why is that important? It almost never happens. It hasn't happened in the 10 or 11 years I've been working with you all, because most of those matters end in separation agreements. But up until the point when we reach a separation agreement, or when with the employee, or when the employee resigns, there is still the possibility that you may have to serve as a judge in a termination hearing. Why do I say this? Why is this important? Has anybody heard me explain this before? This is important because this is why the information that you get about personnel matters necessarily has to be nothing or very limited. So there might be something that's on the front page of, or in the local blogs or the local papers about a teacher, and ironically, your superintendent cannot share anything with you, because if he does, then that could compromise your ability to sit impartially in ultimately what could be a teacher or administrator termination hearing. There's one other category of hearings where you would have to sit as judge. Does anybody know what those are? Also hasn't happened here in Wilton in recent memory. Coach hearings. So athletic coaches who have served in their same coaching position for at least 3 years have the right to a hearing before the board if their contract is non-renewed or terminated. So sometimes, you may find that there is a high-profile coaching situation, also something that you wouldn't know about. So those are the big ones, and now I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask you, what is your role and responsibility as an individual board member? We were just talking about the collective. What about as an individual? Oops. Do you have any responsibility or authority as an individual board member?
You have responsibility, not authority.
Not authority.
Okay, so maybe it was the combination. Authority. What is your authority? So right, as an individual.
Unless the board delegates authority to you.
Exactly. You don't need that CABE course. You already know it. Right. So as an individual board member, you don't have any authority. You only have authority as a member of your team being the board, sitting around this board table. Unless the board delegates specific authority to you, or even sitting in a committee, unless the board delegates authority to a committee to do something. Interestingly, there can be a committee of one. And the reason I say that is that sometimes if the board says, I want you to do this, you have to be careful, because that committee of one might be subject to the FOIA rules. So the other thing I wanted to mention as we're talking about this is, first of all, you have an obligation under state law to implement the educational interests of the state. Is the Board of Education a town body? An arm of the town of Wilton? Or is the Board of Education an agent of the state of Connecticut?
Both. I would think.
No, just
The latter.
Just a town?
State of Connecticut.
Just the state of Connecticut. But you're not wrong in thinking that you are very connected with the town, because the town is your purse strings. The town holds your purse strings, I should say. You get all of your funding from the town. And so that's why you're inextricably linked with the town and the work that you do, as we just heard for the last half hour. But you are an agent of the state, and that's important because you, at your core, have an obligation to implement the educational interests of the state. What are the educational interests of the state? A lot of them, and where can you find them?
Connecticut General Statutes.
Yes, the Connecticut General Statutes. I mention this because sometimes I'm asked, well, do we really have to do this? I'll give a recent example. So in this last legislative session, the General Assembly passed a law requiring boards of education in Connecticut to adopt 3 library policies. I don't know if you're familiar with this, if this has come before you yet, but there are some districts who are boards who say, well, do we really have to do this? And if so, why? Who is the General Assembly to tell us what to do? We're good. Well, the answer is yes, because you are legally obligated under the Connecticut General Statutes, section 10-10A, I believe, to implement all of the laws that the state passes. If you do not do that, then somebody could file a complaint with the state, or the state could bring a complaint sua sponte under section 10-10B that you are not implementing the educational interests of the state, and that's not fun, in short. You don't want to be there. Ultimately, they can compel you to do that by taking you to court. So you may not like a lot of what the General Assembly requires you to do, but you are obligated to implement it. Just a note about budget and a note about your role versus the town's role. So who can tell me about your budget and what authority, if any, the town funding bodies have over your budget?
My understanding is the town sets the amount of the total amount. They cannot manage line items.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
With respect to your operating budget, there is a separate capital budget. Again, I love that I just sat through your capital projects plan, because that is a town account. Your capital account is a town account. It's kind of a shared account. So they get to make the decisions there, and they can make line item decisions, so to speak, but not with respect to your operating budget, which was what you're about to work on starting when you come back. You can ask for a total amount of money, and they can simply appropriate it or not, or they can cut it down, but they cannot micromanage your line items.
And they are actually limited in how much they can cut it down unless we meet certain criteria.
Correct, by the minimum budget requirement, which is a whole separate body of laws. They can't go below what was appropriated the year before, and then there's a number of very specific exemptions that are really narrow. Given the hour, I'm going to go to our first scenario. And by the way, there's a lot of information here. There's no way I could cover it in the next hour and 10 minutes, but I'm hoping, feel free, this is interactive, this is for you, so feel free to ask me questions as we go. I wanna make sure we cover also FOIA and communications as we go through this. So the first scenario is this, if I can read. The board is convened in a public meeting, and the topic of discussion is a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. Community members have strong opinions on the topic in both directions. During public comment, they line up to share their views. You listen carefully to the comments and have your own questions about the impact of a ban on school security and student mental health. You're also wondering whether there may be less costly ways to implement the ban. The superintendent shares the results of his analysis and seems to have addressed all the key points. You have some lingering questions, but in the interest of efficiency, and because you trust your stellar superintendent implicitly, and because you want to get out by 9, you keep your mouth shut. And this was written with you in mind, Dr. Smith. You keep your mouth shut and decide to let the chips fall where they may. Your fellow board members are similarly quiet, and the superintendent decides to implement the ban effective immediately. The next day, the board receives a flurry of angry emails accusing the board of rubber stamping the superintendent's decisions and abdicating its responsibility to oversee matters of school security. You try to ignore the emails, but they just won't stop. You're wondering if you should have addressed each public comment last night as it was made. So I have a number of questions here, but really the goal here is to unpack this. But let's start with the first question, which is hopefully the easiest one. Yeah. Should you have addressed each public comment during the board meeting? Why or why not?
No.
Why not?
You always told us that we had to sit like what was it, the frog on the log?
Bumps on a log?
Bumps on the log. And we just had to sit there and take it, no matter what.
And why is that?
Because we can't address it all, and then it creates, we don't want that dialogue. We don't want to go there. We just have to listen. That's our job, is to listen and not go to where they're going.
Yeah. So there are a number of reasons, and this is very hard for board members because one of your responsibilities, which I didn't specifically mention, is that you do have a responsibility to liaise with the community and to keep your ears to the ground and to report back and to take feedback. And I like the comment you started with, Ruth, when you invited public comment, that's absolutely right. The feedback from the public helps you to formulate your decisions about things. It helps inform the deliberative process, and that's why you have public comment. But the meeting of the Board of Education is a meeting in public. It is not a meeting of the public, and that's an important distinction. So you can invite people to comment and to give you feedback, and you can listen carefully to it and consider it, but it's not an opportunity for you to engage in that dialogue for a number of reasons. Number one, it could be a FOIA violation. So you have public comment on general items, not just agenda items at the beginning and the end of your meetings. Mm-hmm. So if somebody brings something up that's not on your agenda and you start to talk about it, all of a sudden that's a violation of the meeting requirements of FOIA because you're talking about something that is not on the agenda. If you're in a regular meeting, technically, FOIA tip, somebody can move to add the item to the agenda and it can pass by a 2/3 vote. But can you imagine if you tried to get everything done in addition to adding items to the agenda? So there's that. Number two is if somebody brings something up and one of you speaks about it, and what you say somehow prejudices something that could be a due process issue or is inaccurate, or speaks out ahead of your superintendent who is dealing with the issue, that could create a problem and potential liability for the school district. And finally, number three, it's really just a community relations / optics issue. How do you pick and choose who you respond to and who you don't respond to? So for all those reasons, generally speaking, boards do not engage with the public during public comment, but of course, as you appropriately said in your opening comment, people can, of course, email you. We'll talk later about when it's appropriate to forward that email along to Dr. Smith to respond to, but that's the way that people get their questions answered. They have to go through the appropriate chain of command and get the questions addressed at the lowest possible administrative level. So let's get back beyond that piece of it. So basically what's happening here is you have a really important topic and you're all sitting there and you have a lot of good questions and everybody just lets it pass. And so people are mad because they believe that you're not really engaging with the topic and that you're just listening to your great superintendent, which is a good idea. However, maybe people want to see that you've at least asked some of the questions that might be on their minds. So if you had it to do over again, might you have done anything differently? And if so, what?
I think it's really important at this table, like we deal with so much all the time that sometimes we feel like we've exhausted a topic or idea, but like our most visible work should be done at the table. So I think it's really important to engage in discussion, to ask questions, even to ask questions that you might already know the answer to, but you might think that lots of people or in the community might not know the answer to it, and it gives an opportunity for it to be addressed and talked to. And there is I don't believe personally that the superintendent is our one employee, and if the relationship was contentious, then is that the right employee relationship? So I do think that there should be, and usually there is, alignment around the table with the superintendent, and that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions or be probing in a respectful manner. And I think it's also important to remember that it's hard sometimes with the public because getting an answer to a question doesn't necessarily mean it's the answer that they want to hear. And those are two different things, but I think it's important to make sure that the question is asked. And so you can be a rubber stamp because we're perceived as a rubber stamp because you don't in a person's mind because you don't do what they want, but you could also be perceived as a public rubber stamp because you're just not having discussion around the table.
Yeah, so the Board of Education's meetings are the most visible aspect of what you do. So you may receive a lot of information from Dr. Smith that informs your decisions, and you don't really have any questions because he sent you 300 pages of literature about why this is a good idea. You've all done your due diligence and you've read it and you're good. But sometimes, for the benefit of everybody's understanding, and by the way, that would be a public document, right? If somebody made a FOIA request for it, they could get it. Maybe it's posted as part of your agenda. So people could have access to that material and they can read it. But sometimes, because you cannot have discussions outside of a public, appropriately noticed meeting under FOIA, this would be the only time for you to say to each other, hey, are you good? Are you good? Do we have any more questions? And to have a little bit of dialogue about what you've read, maybe to summarize it, because the meeting is the most visible aspect of what you do. Not always. I'm not suggesting that you have a discussion or ask questions just for the sake of it, because that would be inefficient. But keep in mind that a public agency is unique here in Connecticut. It's probably similar in other states because you can't have those discussions in private. This is your one opportunity to talk together about what makes sense for you as a board. Let me skip to the last one and then we'll circle back to the vote. So you're getting all these angry emails. How should you respond, if at all, to the emails?
We let Ruth do that? Or no?
Yeah.
We do not.
You guys are good. You are very disciplined. Yes, so in general,
Even though it's tempting.
Yeah, a good protocol, Ruth as your chair, is your chief spokesperson for the board. Kevin as your superintendent is your chief spokesperson for the administration. Not all issues are board issues, and so this gets to the third bullet point. So if there are issues that relate to operation, then it's always a good idea to forward them to Kevin, and Kevin can forward them, to somebody else as appropriate. If they are emails or feedback that relate to something that the board has done, then generally Ruth would be the one to respond on your behalf. Does anybody here ever respond in addition, on your own? Mm-mm. Okay.
I guess I have a question there, because again, we got the emails around the parent engagement, and we got the hey, I'd like to help, right? And it just comes back to the you have a responsibility to also listen to the town. Is it not appropriate to say, I'll listen, in a personal capacity, right? And how do you separate those two things?
So interesting. So in responding to an email or in having a meeting or in attending a meeting, there's a lot of different ways that you could listen. And I would say any and all of the above. And it's important to remember what I said before, which is you have no special authority as an individual. So you can't promise anything, you can't make representations on behalf of the board. You can listen, and you can report what the board has already done. And that's pretty much it. You can't share confidential information, which you've obtained in executive session, but there is nothing wrong with listening and taking that back when you're sitting at the board table and having that be part of your contribution to the deliberative process.
One of the things, because I get stopped by people all the time, things
So that's
going
the thing
on.
is, I'm trying to figure out how's an email different from somebody walks up to me on the street and says, oh, you're on the board, can we talk I want to tell you, I had a parent stop me and say, I wanted to ask you about the testing at military school. And I was like, I don't know anything about the military school, but if you want to tell me stuff, I'll listen.
Yeah.
And she told me what her concerns were. I was like, great, thank you very much. And
So what I always do is I listen, and then I also encourage them to reach out to their teacher, to the lowest, to the first person,
also
their
in the
teacher.
KV, reinforce the chain of command.
But so I reinforce the process, and then I ask them to get back to me if the process isn't working for them. Because that's what we are. We're a policy, the board can say to then Kevin, we have these processes in place for parents to be able to ask these questions or get feedback. and a parent came to me, I might send Kevin a note, like, a parent came to me and they said they reached out to the teacher and the administrator and they didn't get back to them. The process should work. So, and I'm always careful with people when I tell them, like, getting the answer you want and getting an answer or two are two different things. I think I when the emails come into the BOE, I always try to reply all so everybody sees the interaction. And just in general, if somebody emails to you individually, I think like the best kind of process is you can respond to them and then either include all of the BOE on your response or include me. And that way we're all, none of us have information that we don't all have.
Okay, so if you include all the BOE, maybe I'm jumping ahead. On the other board I've been on, it's like, don't email everyone because now it becomes a meeting.
So it's, if it's just like information only, then it's just information, like, thank you for your email. Like the way I email people back, like I don't give them answer. I say, this is where the board is, this is where we are in the process or whatnot.
Yeah, so a couple things. On that point, if it's a unilateral communication and nobody replies all, then it doesn't violate FOIA. But the moment somebody replies, then it's a discussion among the board.
Sounds like debate or discussion.
Right. But Ruth, I want to come back to what you're saying because you're drawing an important distinction between somebody reaching out to any of you to talk about really something that is more operational in nature and somebody giving you feedback on something that the board has taken up. I completely agree. I love reinforce the chain of command. My advice on that, it's what you said. It's thank you, why don't you talk to principal? Why don't you email Dr. Smith? I also would add to that I suggest you should, and Kevin, tell me if you disagree, you should also give Kevin a heads up anytime something like that comes to you. Because you don't know if that person is going to actually reach out to the appropriate administrator, and it could be something really serious, and I wouldn't want you to be sitting alone with that information if it never makes its way. Because some people in the community are under the misunderstanding that if they tell you, then they're good, right? They've told the administration, everybody knows, but that's not actually your role. Your role is not operational in nature. So tell Kevin that's a good practice. In terms of responding to email, I love to listen to what you all do and what's working for you because there isn't one right or wrong answer except the FOIA wrong answer, which is you can't reply all. So for example, if Ruth replied on behalf of the board and then Mark chimed in and said, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden you've got two board members replying to the entire board and technically that's a meeting via email. You could respond individually, which is what I know some board members do in other places. Like if Mark replied just to the person who wrote and said, thank you for your feedback. I'm not sure why some board members feel that they need to do that. If you're not doing that, I'm not suggesting you start, but technically that's something that could be done under FOIA. Cell phone ban. I don't even know the answer to this. Did the board vote on the ban? You did.
You voted
On the policy, I'm sorry, we voted on the policy that then implemented.
personal devices.
Oh, okay. So the
Treatment
policy.
of cell phones is part of the regulation.
Oh, okay. Okay, the policy. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is where I
Yes.
the policy is the acceptable use policy?
Yeah.
Okay. And the cell phone piece specifically is part of the administrative regulation?
It is.
Perfect. And I say this because this is where I want to circle back to what I was saying about the distinction between your role in policy and Kevin's role in regulations. Cell phones, that's an operational matter. It's a very important issue for a lot of school districts and people in the community feel very strongly about it on both sides. But really that is an administrative operational matter. At its core, it's a school rule. So that may come up as you go along, right? You may give Kevin feedback on it sounds like you did. But there are certain things that he can do as the superintendent that you don't need to do and probably shouldn't do. Can't believe we're only on scenario 1, but we've covered, I think, scenario 2. But let's just do it. Yesterday, a parent published a piece in a local blog detailing the racism and bullying that he believes runs rampant in the district schools. He criticized the administration for failing to take appropriate action and identified 2 administrators by name. During tonight's board meeting, parents line up to pile on and tell their own stories about bullying, and some affirm the concerns about the 2 administrators named in the blog. You are very worried as a board member about your own liability here, as well as the board's. You decide to speak up and express empathy for the parents who have bravely spoken out. You reassure the parents that the board will be looking into these very serious concerns and that any administrators who are not doing their jobs will be held accountable.
Jeez.
Another board member is furious about what you said. Her kids have thrived in the district schools, and the named administrators from her perspective do stellar work. She speaks up in support of the administrators and adds, "We have no issues here. Our administrators bend over backward to support all students, and I have the utmost confidence that they are doing everything by the book. They can't be expected to control what comes out of students' mouths."
Well, that's a fun one.
Hodgepodge of issues.
Yeah.
So, did anyone, here's the easy one, did anybody do anything wrong here?
Yes.
No.
What?
Board members speaking up or sympathizing with the parent and saying that they're gonna talk to the administrators and they're gonna take on this role that's not theirs to take on.
It's not our job to be looking into these very serious concerns.
Right?
Or to do, even to get into the dialogue.
And by the way, putting aside the fact that they spoke and engaged with the public and during public comment, pretend that this was just emails or, face-to-face conversation. So you can take that piece out of it because we already went over the public comment piece of it.
You also already told us this. I don't think it's prejudicial
Yes,
if we have to be a judge, so yeah, you're done.
yes. What
Also, in general, it can get dicey, but the chair, the secretary, whoever's kind of moderating the meeting, public comment isn't a place to call out individual teachers or administrators and disparage or talk negatively about. We do have, civility parameters, and we do have in our bylaws how we don't, bring, make personal comments about individuals.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I was going to ask, do you have that in your bylaws specifically? Because it's interesting, this comes up a lot with boards that do not. And the question is whether you could cut off somebody who is starting to name individual employees and speak badly about them. And the answer is that if you allow people to speak positively about employees, but you don't allow them to speak negatively, you are actually engaging in viewpoint discrimination in violation of the First Amendment. So my advice is always tell people you are not allowed to talk about anybody, period, positive or negative. And hopefully that's, if it's in your bylaws, you're ahead of the curve. Some districts will, if there's a really sensitive personnel matter that they anticipate will come up, will say at the beginning of the meeting, don't talk about anybody about anything, and that way they can say, all right, you just violated our ground rule, which is a viewpoint neutral ground rule.
Jess, in this scenario too, is this item an agenda item?
Well, right, so no, that's the other problem. If you start,
can't talk about it because then it's a FOIA issue.
then it's a FOIA issue. Exactly, which is what we talked about before, if you start engaging with the public. And then the other piece of this scenario we've already talked about, so I don't want to belabor it, but it's just the idea that these allegations are really allegations for your administration to take up. And Ruth, you mentioned before that it's your job to make sure that the process is being followed. How do you do that?
Well, I think, we can ask as an agenda item, you can ask, for report backs, we have these policies in place and we want, have our director of HR come to the table or other things and just report on overall the operations of behind the policies and procedures and whether and how they are making sure that they are followed, accordingly.
That's a great practice, because that is your responsibility. What about with these specific, with a specific concern, like this one, for example? You're aware of it, people have talked about it, there's allegations of rampant bullying and racism in the schools, and your administration, is dealing with it, and then 2 months later, people line up again and say it's not dealt with.
I guess maybe a more general question. Like in a corporate board, you would have an audit committee, and the auditor reports to the board, not the CEO. Is there an audit function here?
No.
No.
So in this situation, there's no one right answer. I can tell you what I've done with this type of thing, and everything is different if there's a particular area of oversight that you would need to exercise. And sometimes I wouldn't call it an audit committee, but you may need to have an independent investigation of something. It's rare because you'd be doing independent investigations till the end of time if you looked into everything. So what triggers that is another thing that you have to think judiciously about. But what I've done in these types of situations is you could have, it's really what you said, a report from the appropriate person in the appropriate position to make that report. In something like this, you could have, what I've done is I've done an anonymized report on how the administration has handled student discipline matters or, allegations of bullying. Here was this situation, this is what happened. You have to be careful about FERPA, so it really has to be de-identified and anonymized. I've also given, or it's not just me, but this is my experience, I have shared with the board what are the procedures that the administrators use to investigate allegations related to students. I give your administrators trainings on that. So you could look at the deck. You could ask questions about those trainings and whether or not those processes are being followed. So that same approach can be applied to pretty much any policy that might come up. And that's how you would exercise your oversight function and obligation.
I think one of the things that's important for a board when something like that is to make sure that the community, if they're upset about it, knows the pathway.
Right, the chain of command and
Right, and how, if they have a complaint, who that should go to, what the expectations should be in follow-up or response. So there's an understanding that there's a place for them to be heard.
Right, but we're not the solution, right? So we would so Kevin, it would be on Kevin.
Right.
To find and how this is gonna play out.
Right.
And how it's gonna, and then come back to us and tell us how it worked or didn't work.
Well, or
not
should Kevin
necessarily.
report back to you? On a specific, student situations are different from other situations in general because of FERPA. So you really shouldn't be involved, even if somebody comes up to you in the grocery store and says, this is what happened to my child, and the administration's handling it. Even if somebody told you that, you still do not have a FERPA right to get the outcome, to hear the outcome of that. And also, that's really not your role anyway. What are you gonna do about it?
Right.
Kevin could say, I'm handling it, and it's handled, right? Now, if that same parent comes to you and says, that wasn't handled, I'm still upset, the administration botched that, then what?
We still go back to Kevin.
Yeah, you say, this is what the parent said, let Kevin handle it. And at the end of the day, there are different pathways that parents can pursue if they are truly unhappy. There are lots of different avenues. But the avenue is not to come to you and have you address that specific concern.
Or solve it. Yeah.
Fortunately for all of you, because you're all volunteers and you don't have the capacity to even solve any of that.
You know, Jessica, this isn't specific to this scenario, but we've had plenty of opportunities over the years where, kids or families experience really painful moments. And so some of the other ways we've tried to get in the surface and really partner is to listen. And so we had a meeting here 2 or 3 years ago, I think, at least 3 of you were present for it. And we invited, kids and families to come and tell stories. And we all just took the role of listening. And so I think, I am still kind of thinking about Mark's question from a few minutes ago about, you've got multiple roles here and one of your roles is to listen. And, we're all in the position of wanting to help people and make life better and the system better and so on. And so that can be really hard with some of the legal constraints. And so having the opportunity to talk and to create some other opportunities that are maybe beyond specific situations but address larger concerns can be healthy. And I think we've seen some success as a result of some of the the small steps we've taken.
That was a very powerful meeting.
It was. I think more tuned into this specific scenario, the other real challenge in a community like ours is everybody knows each other. And so we're always hamstrung with FERPA when incidents are published in Good Morning Wilton and everybody knows the players and I sit here and say, I really can't talk about it. Personal identifiable information. That's just really tough.
Especially in today's day and age with photos and pictures, everybody, it's a small community.
Yeah. The other great thing that you all did recently, maybe 3-4 years ago, was you invited parents to come and learn about how the district handles bullying and cell phones and technology. And so that education piece, I think, can go a long way to help parents understand the process.
Yeah, and updating the handbooks I thought was a really smart, because that's one of the most common criticisms is there was an issue and there was no follow-up and no justice. And so trying to be more specific with responses in the handbooks, I think has been helpful.
Scenario 3 is similar, so let's skip on to scenario 4.
Imagine if you had to do that in court,
Yeah, this is
trying to make your point.
all right.
Hold on, the evidence is coming.
Yeah, exactly. I realize this is gonna change the game.
Mine. All right. Yeah, it's almost disappointing when I finally get this. Recently, 3 board members have become very concerned about the new library policies that I was just talking about a minute ago. And they wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Education as members of the Wilton Board of Education to lodge a complaint. Some of the other board members do not agree and like the new policies. These board members heard about this letter and were outraged that the 3 board members did not let them know about the letter in advance. Did the 3 board members do anything wrong?
Yes, definitely.
And what was that?
Taking on something taking on a cause without talking to the others, and probably that's an inappropriate thing for a board and to do anyway. To take on the state. I mean, I'm sure they want to. I mean, it's tempting.
According to CABE, advocacy is one of our responsibilities.
Right.
If you voted.
But they acted outside their
All of us should
capacity.
do
No,
it.
that I'm just saying, I think you said the board, and I just want to distinguish between, to me, if they were doing this in their individual capacity, and they didn't say as a member of the Board of Ed, and weren't therefore connecting themselves in that way, and so as a citizen of the state of Connecticut, I should be allowed to have a feeling about that.
Yeah.
To me, the worst thing they did is
Shouldn't
being
have
as
all-
members of
But
the
the 3 should have conferred with everybody else.
If they're representing the board,
If they're
Yes.
representing the
Right,
board,
if
it
it's-
should have come from the board.
Then this comes from the board, not from the
Right,
individuals.
not just the 3 individuals.
since I've been on the board, any activity like this is from Kevin. on behalf of the school district, right? I mean, we've never, as a board, written I guess letters to the editor on stuff that you've written that we've all endorsed, but.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, there was one. I think it was when Debbie was chair, and that's, I'm going back, that there was a letter, and it might have been about regionalization, I don't know what it was, but there was one time that we as a board voted to allow the chair to write a letter on behalf of the board. And you either, and because it gets into like FOIA and drafts and all this stuff, usually the way you do it is you vote that this is on what the letter will say, and you give, permission to the chair to express that sentiment in the letter. So you can do it that way, or you can do it where you actually, sit around the table and draft the letter up out in public, and that can get unwieldy, but you can sit at the table and draft the letter all together too. Yeah, it is tricky though, even when you have like a local issue. Like I personally, as a citizen, have given statements, public comments to the Board of Selectmen, and I've stood up and said, I'm here as Ruth DeLuca, resident of, 19 Deacons Lane, and not in my capacity as a member or chair of the Board of Education.
So everything Ruth said, go with that. That's exactly right. You hit all the points I wanted to hit. Number one, you can't speak on behalf of the board or write on behalf of the board without having been delegated with that authority. Number two, it's really hard to, even if you're delegated with that authority, or even if the board decides to put out something in writing, it's hard to draft something while still complying with FOIA. Your options are to sit around and draft collectively, or to delegate responsibility to one person to do the draft. That often comes as a surprise to new board members. I guess it sounds like you've served on other boards, so you're familiar with the FOIA rules, but brand new board members are always astonished that you can't circulate drafts by email and, provide comments. You can't, because of the FOIA rule. Because if you email them around, it becomes a meeting, an illegal meeting. So the best way to do it is really to delegate, as you said, responsibility to usually the chair to express the sentiment. The other thing that I thought was a really good point and a best practice is if you're absolutely free to speak out as a citizen, a resident of Wilton, but it is a good idea to clarify before you do so. I am speaking in my personal individual capacity. I am not here as a member of the Wilton Board of Education. That's especially important if anybody serves on other town committees or, PTA or anything like that. I've been asked, can I still do that? And I say, sure, just make sure that people understand you're not there as a representative of the board, you're there as yourself. You can wear different hats at different times. And of course, if you're serving in that capacity, it's not that you have to tune out what you hear. That can be part of what informs your decision making at the board table. But there's a difference between that and you going somewhere and making representations as a board member or on behalf of the board. So that's the point of scenario 4. I have seen.
I'm sorry, the chairman can write a letter as long as we agree that the chairman can write the letter.
Yes, and so thank you. Bullet 3 is, and this is where I say that as wonderful as Ruth is, she has no special powers. She has the same powers and authority as every other board member, except she does have specific responsibilities to serve as the chief spokesperson for the board, which comes out in different ways, to do anything that you authorize her to do, to set the agenda, working with Kevin. There's specific responsibilities she has, but she could not say, you know what, I think we should write to the legislature and complain about the library policy. So I'm just going to go and do that. That's not what it means to be a spokesperson. A spokesperson means that you're the one who conveys the board's sentiments as expressed by the board through a vote. Yeah. The other thing.
Oh, sorry, if it's a nuance thing, because you talked about if the board ever did want to write anything, and coming back to the email rules, I could also imagine a scenario, I guess, where you'd ask somebody, sort of in one meeting, hey, we want to create a letter about this. could you bring a draft to the next meeting? And presumably the one-way communication could happen where in advance of the meeting, just like other board materials we get, it's like, hey, everybody, this is on the agenda. We're going to edit this together. Here's the draft in advance. Like that presumably is legal.
It is absolutely legal. It's almost never done,
Okay.
because what's the point of a draft if you're editing it in public? Because then people get to see,
What was taken out or,
yes.
yes, you know.
Because if you're
It's like the
creating a
sausage
public
making.
message.
Well, I'm saying if you're going to do the thing in public
Yes, but you can
anyway,
share it in advance
it
if you
would
want
make
to.
it more efficient.
Yes. Yes, but you can't comment about it back and
Yeah,
forth.
yeah,
It just
that's
becomes
understood.
materials in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am not aware of any time that any board has ever drafted something in public.
Just for fun.
No, because if you're working on a public statement, I think it almost undermines the efficacy of the statement to show how the statement was drafted. So the other way to do it is, well, I'll leave it at that. That's more of a privileged conversation that we can have privately. The other thing I did want to say about this is sometimes this is kind of a badly behaving board member move. I will see people, board members publish things in the local paper or the blog, and they'll sign their name and then they'll say Wilton Board of Education. Not any of you, we're here in Wilton. But that is almost a tacit representation that you're writing on behalf of the Wilton Board of Education. So I recommend that you not do that. I've seen board members get upset with other board members for doing something like that, like during campaign season, for example. So, moving on. Conflicts of interest. So, this is an interesting one, and this may come up. What is considered to be a conflict of interest?
So, I mean, if it directly affects you or your child, that would be a conflict of interest. If it directly affects, Mark's wife works in the system, so if it directly affected her contract or her remuneration or a policy that directly has to do with her area of work, that would be a conflict of interest. If it affects a contract, let's say, that maybe your family can benefit from, that would be a conflict.
So almost everything that you're mentioning has some sort of financial component, which is right. That's really what conflict of interest is about. And it does come up when we talk about board members who have, a spouse who's employed by the district. What can you be part of? What can you not be part of? That's maybe a conversation that we have offline. But a lot of things may indirectly affect your spouse, and that I would say is not a conflict of interest. It's only when it could directly affect your family or your spouse that it could become a conflict of interest. And I've had these conversations separately with others, but the onus is on you to recuse yourself. Your fellow board members could also point it out, but really there's nobody who is going to enforce that other than yourself, except if, I don't mean you, but yourselves. And the only recourse that you would have is, fortunately, nobody can be removed from their position as a Board of Education member. But the recourse, does anybody know what your recourse is for a board member who has done something inappropriate?
You can
Censured.
censure at the
Censure.
table.
Yeah.
Censure. Yeah, it's censure. So that's the point about conflict of interest. The other thing I'd like to say about conflict of interest is, on the flip side of it, I would caution you not to be too liberal in determining what's a conflict of interest and what isn't. Because at the end of the day, you were elected to serve in your role and to make decisions along with your other board members. And if you're recusing yourself left and right, then you're not actually fulfilling your fiduciary obligation to participate as a board member. So it could go the other way as well.
I always I have kids in the school, so sometimes it's like hard, when you're at the table and you talk about a reading program and your kid is in the classroom during that reading program. And I do try to be careful, not all the time successfully, about bring personal into the conversation at the table. I mean, we're a small community and people know, and sometimes it's appropriate, but I do, think about that.
So I'm so glad you said that too, because here's what I'll say about that. Many of you have kids in the system, spouse in the system. Of course you do. And of course everything you do is going to affect your children because they're students in the school district. I would go as far as to say that none of what you do, almost none of what you do is a conflict of interest. To your point, Ruth, I think it is a good practice not to talk about your personal experiences when you're debating. You can be informed by them, for sure. You have to be necessarily. You are who you are. Mm-hmm. You know what your child is experiencing. You know what you've experienced. You know what your spouse has experienced. But a good practice sitting around the board table is, that can be informing your contributions to the discussion, but I wouldn't start to talk about those personal experiences.
I just want to clarify that my children are in high school, so I have no idea what they experience. Whatever you ask, it's like
fair point.
Nothing.
We don't talk.
There you go. Didn't start in middle school for you?
Right.
All right. Let's see if I can. I'm just going to go to whatever slide this thing wants me to go to. Committees. So, I'm giving it away by going to this slide, but you have how many committees here?
So we have 2. We have policy and we have business operations. We used to have the teaching and learning, and we took that out of committee and made it a committee of the whole and bring those.
So the board is essentially.
Yeah.
So the board is essentially the committee.
And you have 3 people, I'm guessing?
2.
2 people on each committee?
2 on each committee.
All right.
Yeah.
So committees, true or false, committees are public agencies subject to all the rules of FOIA that the full board is subject to.
True.
Right.
Definitely.
So, true or false, the 2 people on the committee can speak to each other privately about substantive committee issues.
Mm-mm.
False.
Yeah.
Yeah. So CABE actually recommends that, you're a small board, but CABE recommends that you have no fewer than 4 people on a committee because of this quorum issue. But in any event, committees are public agencies. Those 2 people can't talk to each other or email each other about substantive work. They have to do their work in public, and the purpose of the committees is to maximize the efficiency of the work of the board. Can committees do, generally the work in committees is brought to the board for approval, right? So committees can't really take action unless they're authorized to do so by the board. Not so much applicable, not such an issue for you all, because you have few committees with few people on them.
Yeah, and none of our committees are authorized to make decisions or voting bodies.
Yeah.
What about, so the Business Operations Committee is a combination committee between ourselves and the Board of Finance?
It's not though. It's a Board of Ed
We
committee
just invite them
invite.
to be.
with Board of
got it.
Finance representation.
So if we decided to disband that committee, that's on
We would do that on our own.
that's on us.
Got it.
Well, do you want to talk about policies? Would that be helpful, or is how they're drafted? We talked a little bit about it at the beginning, so we can move on. So just a quick refresher, and Mark, maybe this is new for you. Meetings are pretty much anything when a quorum of the board convenes either electronically or in person. But there are a few exceptions to that under FOIA. One of them is a meeting of a personnel search committee for an executive level candidate search. And the board can appoint the entire board as that committee. So any meetings that you would have to search for example, a principal or an assistant superintendent, those meetings are not meetings under FOIA. Any chance or social meeting, it's hard to, I don't know if you do that. Many boards don't because they're afraid of being accused of conducting board business. I forgot to mention that this is another key role of the board. Collective bargaining. So we just had teacher negotiations. Feels like we just had them.
We did.
It does.
Or it feels like we had them a long time
Like,
ago, I should say. So collective bargaining is something that you all, or a group of you all, participate in. Those meetings are not considered meetings. They're considered non-meetings for the purpose of strategy and negotiations with respect to collective bargaining. Caucus, a caucus of members of a single political party is not considered a meeting. But one question I posed to myself when I presented at the Freedom of Information Commission's annual conference in the fall, Tom Mooney and I, my partner and I, what about if you have an email exchange among members of the same political party?
With their board extension?
Yeah.
Or like personal?
No, just email, you have an email exchange. Is that a caucus?
What's the difference?
It's a caucus, you can email. Are those emails subject to FOIA?
No.
They are.
They
I
are.
think they are.
They are.
They are.
It's not a private meeting,
Yeah.
but they are a public record.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
just FYI. And communications limited to notice of meetings of a public agency and their agendas. I do want to say, I think the next slide is, I'm not going to go through the specific rules of meeting postings, but executive session. So there are specific reasons under FOIA to go into executive session. And I've listed them here, personnel matters, but it can't just be general personnel matters. Like we want to cut this number of people. I won't say identify any group because I know we're in public and they're, it has to be about a specific person or specific people, and those people or person have to be given notice and the opportunity to have that discussion held in public. And the agenda has to identify the person by name. So it's a very kind of limited exception. Why would you do this? It would be to, and you may not have to identify them by name. You could identify them by title, but it could be to talk about a separation agreement after it's occurred. You want kind of a breakdown of what happened and why, right? Then you could talk about that person. Pending claims and litigation, security, and real estate, and then confidential documents is the catch-all. So if you're talking about, that's why expulsion hearings can be an executive session, because you're talking about confidential student records. That's why attorney-client privileged discussions can be an executive session. Interestingly, if you ever invite me into executive session, technically I have to give you a written document, and I do give you a written document because it's the conversation is privileged to executive session only based upon that privileged document, not based upon my talking to you. The key thing about executive session, and you're all great, law-abiding board members, is I do want to emphasize that those discussions are confidential. It's really important that you not share the content of those discussions with anybody outside of executive session.
And you also can do Kevin's review in executive session.
Yes, that's considered
So
a
that's
personnel
considered
matter.
personnel matter.
Yeah,
Personnel matter.
personal.
Yeah.
Yep. Interestingly, if you're ever doing a self-review,
Yeah.
that if you're reviewing the full board and the board's success in terms of accomplishing your goals, that has to be in public. The only way that you could privilege that board self-review to executive session is if you review individual board members. So you would actually have to notice it as a review of individual board member and name each of you. And you would each have to be given the opportunity to have that discussion be held in public.
Well, this board has never done that, but, if they wanted to evaluate together each of their own kind of personal performance, and they name that in an executive session to discuss the performance of, that's permissible.
It is. it is, and boards do that. Yep. Yes, so I think that was all
So
I
you
was
could
gonna
do it like, put everybody's name for one executive session all at once.
say. Yes,
It doesn't have to be like serial or anything, it could be like all at once.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is there was a FOIA decision a couple years ago that was very unfortunate. And it was, so normally, prior to this FOIA decision, boards would just automatically include the superintendent in executive sessions. This FOIA decision said you can only, because you have the ability to invite people into executive sessions, however, they can only be invited in if they are there to provide information or testimony about the issue that you're discussing. So, if you invite Kevin into your executive sessions, make sure that he's there for a specific purpose and that he speaks. Because this FOIA decision was about that very issue. The superintendent was automatically included and really didn't say anything. He was just there. And the Freedom of Information Commission found that to be a violation of FOIA.
So wait, so do I need to invite Kevin into every executive session?
Yes.
Because we don't currently have that practice. I usually
For a
just,
specific reason.
so from now on, when we do the agendas for executive session, I put the reason for the executive session
And the reason.
and inviting Kevin Smith for purposes of this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to put that on the agenda, but when you vote to go into executive session, you would say, we're inviting Dr. Smith to provide us with information about the school security plans.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so then okay,
That's
because I don't have a practice of inviting him in.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is the advanced board training course. These are all the little quirky things that
Okay,
I
no,
don't get
so we
to talk
should
about.
to change
Yeah.
our practice on
That was a FOIA
Yeah.
decision from a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So the fix, if you want to write as members of the Wilton Board of Education to the General Assembly, the fix for this is to pass a law saying that Kevin is a
Ex
an
officio.
ex officio member of the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you were doing an executive session with more than one agenda item, and I know that you can't like have an executive session meeting, you have to have executive session agendas, and a person is providing information on one of those items, but not the other,
They have to leave.
are they, okay, they're
Yeah.
not grandfathered in, great.
No, they have to leave. All right, so that's.
Yeah.
And you all know you can't vote in executive session.
Yes.
The other little quirky rule of executive sessions, and I see this all the time, you can't even vote to exit executive session. You just exit, you come out. So I always kind of smile when I see boards, when I'm in an executive session and I see boards move to, exit, to adjourn executive session, because you just leave. So a couple of points about keeping us on
Yeah,
time.
no, we're fine.
But I also, feel free to jump in if there's something you want me to pivot to. What I was gonna talk about is records, and I was gonna scare you a little bit about records for a minute. So FOIA, we just talked a lot about the meetings requirements of FOIA. There's also a records component of FOIA, and this is the component that means that all of the records maintained by the school district and its employees and Board of Education members are subject to public disclosure under FOIA, except if an exemption applies. So that means that even if you are talking about board business on your personal cell phone via text message, that's a public document. If you're using your personal email and talking about board business, that's a public document. My advice, which is easier said than done, is it's easy to not use your personal email. Use your Wilton Public Schools email. It's harder, I think, for most people to avoid using text to communicate about board business. But I suggest you do it. Because I've seen too many board members fall into the issue. So what people will do is they may make a FOIA request for any record about X. And they will specifically, whether or not they specifically mention text messages, those are still required to be reviewed and collected. Nobody's gonna confiscate your phone, but you'll get an email from Lucille saying, please forward anything you have or screenshot anything you have on this particular topic. If you have it and if it wasn't automatically deleted, because you automatically delete your text messages every 30 days, for example, you have to provide it. If it's not there, you don't have to provide it. But by the way, there are municipal records retention laws that govern how long particular records have to be retained. Generally speaking, text messages are considered transient records that don't have a particular retention requirement, except if you're under a legal hold because there is a litigation and you've been told to preserve records. I don't think we have many, if any, legal holds right now in Wilton. But if you do get one, you'll have to think about things like text messages. So long story short, text messages, just be careful. Because of that, you're also not exempt from the meeting rules via text. So make sure you're not text messaging a quorum of your fellow board members unless it's a caucus. That's pretty much my PSA on texts and emails.
If we could just for a minute, because there's always been confusion about like whether individual board members can pick up the phone and call each other or talk to each other or have a conversation. And I think that sometimes there's been, advice given on the town side that's different from what we've always practiced or known. So if we can just clarify that, I think it would be important, because I think that it's my understanding that there's nothing that says I can't pick up the phone and call Lori and, have a conversation with her.
That's 100% right. You can absolutely call individual people. What you can't do is call Lori and say, Lori, let's make sure this cell phone ban passes.
Right.
Pass it on.
But you can serial vote or anything.
That's the challenge. Would anybody ever know if you did that? No, except if they make a FOIA complaint and then you have to testify under oath about who said what to whom and prove a negative and, but yes, you absolutely can pick up the phone and call each other to have a conversation. Also, as I said, now I think this is the third time, caucuses are also fine. So it could be more than one person if you're members of the same political party.
Right. But there's nothing that prevents you, whether you're in the same party or not, or anything
Cross-party
like that.
lines.
Yeah, there's nothing that prevents individual board members from, having a conversation.
Correct. Yes. There's some exemptions from disclosure. I don't know that we need to, this is scenario 6. So we can skip scenario 6. So I want to maybe end with this one, which is about communications and information sharing. Some board members are more engaged than others, and they ask the superintendent and other administrators, cabinet members, principals for a lot of information. Not all of these requests or the information provided in response to them make their way to every board member. In addition, the superintendent is receiving complaints from some principals that they're spending all their time creating paperwork for and meeting with board members and don't have time to deal with urgent matters at their schools. At last night's board meeting, one board member stood up and pounded her fist when she saw another board member reviewing a budget spreadsheet that she had never received.
That's fun. What a great board.
So this is really where I help you all. I facilitate a conversation among all of you and Kevin about what is your protocol, what's your best practice or preferred practice with respect to information requests and information sharing. I will say there is one kind of hard and fast rule, which is this, that board members should not be approaching principals or really anybody other than Kevin and asking for information unless somehow they've been specifically authorized to do that. But beyond that, in terms of your practice with Kevin and Kevin's practice with you, that's really, my view is if it's not broken, don't fix it. So what has been working? And Mark, this might help you and as you prepare to engage and make information requests.
So Mark will find this out as we move to budget. We do have a more formal process for information gathering under budget, because we do wanna make sure that everybody asks questions and that everybody sees the questions that are being asked and sees the answers. So during budget, we ask that all questions get sent either to me or to Kevin, and then we have a document that gets fed all the questions and gets all the answers. And then that's not a live document, but the PDF of that document is shared periodically, and it's also shared at the table, and it becomes part of our meeting materials. We also have a question document that's not budget related. So there are times that board members have questions that would be interesting for other board members to know, and I think it's important for everybody to all have the same information. So if you have questions, like about a policy, about how something works, about how does a parent, I got a question from a parent about how they're supposed to respond to this request or anything like that. We ask that they come to me, or they can go directly to Kevin. They get put on the question sheet. The question sheet, if there's new items for it, gets sent through the consent agenda. So it becomes public, and all board members becomes documented. And I think it's also a way for the public to feel like board members aren't rubber stamps, that there's a conduit for board members to get questions answered that don't rise to table agenda items or table discussions.
That sounds great. Now, what about if it's not just a question, but it's I want to see a breakdown of all discipline imposed from 1995 to 2025, and I want it disaggregated by subgroup.
Yeah.
As an individual board member, if that came to me, I would go and say, is this something the whole board needs to see? Is there an agenda item? And there is a process for requesting agenda items.
Okay. Yeah. So something large like that, it is like an agenda component, and we all need to be cognizant of everybody's time and resources.
Yeah. I will say, there are kind of two other pieces here too, because I think this board also should operate informally as necessary. And so sometimes people will have a question, and I'm trying to think of a recent example, that the answer would be interesting to the whole board, and so it'll be a question that might come to me, and I'll respond and include, this question came from so-and-so, and here's the answer.
I think that's a good idea for everything. And it sounds like you have that with your question sheet and with that practice. I mean, not necessarily, because there might be.
Right, I think hey, how do I get my badge? That's
right.
Six people that need to know, get that, reply all.
Yeah, I actually, the other night I was with a new board member, and they said, well, what about if it's just I need background material or background information about something because I'm new. But then we went down the rabbit hole of, well, is it background information because you're new, or is it background information because you're trying to make a decision about the budget and you want the history of X?
Yeah. So, Jessica, I have a personal philosophy. I think, I have a lot of personal philosophies. That's irrelevant. It's hard, I think, for board members to do their job because it's not a job that's well understood. And so, we could forever fight over the line between policy and governance and operations, and some boards do that. I think it's really important, and this is my personal philosophy, that board members know as much as they want to and are capable. And so I've had a long-standing practice of inviting board members in to walk alongside school administrators and teachers when we're doing learning walks, if we have professional learning experiences that people are interested in, if we're investigating, a curricular issue and they want to participate. I really work hard to enable that, and that can create knowledge inequality if not everybody's able to do that. But it's a practice that I've maintained in this district for all the years I've been here, and it's mostly been effective. And I think members have appreciated those opportunities, and I don't know that that's routine in every community, but it seems to work here.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that out of respect for everybody's time and just knowing if there is a school that you want to go into or a principal you want to talk to or whatever, just to go through Kevin, and then that way You know, and usually Kevin will just say, oh, we'll just reach out, if it's military, reach out to Kathy or whatever, but just so he is aware of board's contact and connection with others, so.
Yeah, and if I get feedback from my staff that it's too much, we work it out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I would say in general, I always advise, I completely agree with that go through Kevin, because all your principals are wonderful, but in some districts, principals can feel intimidated by being approached by a board member who says, I wanna visit your school. So I think that's a great practice. So I wanna be respectful of everybody's time, it's 9:00. If anybody has more questions, I'm happy to answer them, I'm here. But if not, we could probably spend 4 more hours, but we'll save it for next year.
Is there any topic or question that anybody
I have
wanted?
like a policy type question on policies that come down from the state.
Yes.
How do we know that we have every policy that we're supposed to have that's come down from the legislature?
Great question.
So you're a model policy subscriber, right? So thank you for that. I love this question because policies are my thing. So my firm, Shipman, we offer a model policy service that you subscribe to. And we monitor I was gonna say every year, but it's really like every day. We monitor what you're supposed to be doing, what the policies that are required are. And so every year we do a major model policy update based upon what the General Assembly has done. We update all of our model policies and then we send them out in a big batch. We just sent out our big batch a few weeks, maybe a month ago. And that's how you know. Now, I think you also have CABE policies and you have.
I'm a lunatic about it, so I crosswalk CABE and Shipman's, and it might surprise you to know they don't always match. And that could be a timing thing, but you know, the other step that we take too, we just did it this summer, is we audit our policy manual. We did it 6 years ago, and so I think it's probably the bigger challenge is timing, right? Because these things get adopted and we don't always immediately implement, right? So we're working on it. We're waiting for language or tinkering with language.
Yeah, and everybody faces that challenge, and it's just policy might be required effective September 1, and you can't possibly do it because they passed it August 30th. I should also mention that policies can also be mandated by federal law, like for example, Title IX, non-discrimination, Title VI. So it's the states as well as federal law. And I also do want to say that CABE, as I said, has a model policy service, so I assume they do the same thing every year.
Quarterly.
Quarterly.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Good question.
Anybody?
Thank you.
For regulations, the regulations get written by Kevin and we don't vote on regulations.
You don't vote on regulations, although I'd have to check your bylaws. I don't think you do.
Not typically, no. And so I think, generally, most policies that are mandated by law, we either have a Shipman model or CABE has a model for every policy, both required and recommended with an accompanying regulation. And so, we often reference those two bodies. And then the regulations, when there is an accompanying regulation, will come, as a read alongside. And you have voted on the regulations as, kind of part of the policy package. Not in every case. Some policies don't have regulations.
Would you ever
some policies are regulations.
Sorry, would you ever change the regulation without changing the policy?
Probably. I'd have to think of some examples. But I wouldn't do it in my office by myself. Generally it's a matter of practice. All of that works through the policy committee and then comes to the board. I'd have to think about regulation changes.
Well, there could be how you decide to get information, if we say in a policy, it's for you to monitor something, you might, and you have a regulation about how you gather that information, that may change or, but
Yeah.
it's very, I don't know. I mean, I think that like the regulations are an expression of the policy. So like when policies come to us and we look at the regulations, we want to make sure that the regulations in general map what we're trying to achieve through our policy. But like there's more than one way to achieve that, and that's why it's like left to Kevin to figure out the best way to go ahead and implement something.
Yeah, I can give you an example of where it's only happened once, where a superintendent has had to administratively change a regulation on the fly. It had to do with a timeline. And there was a bit of an issue where the regulations specified the timeline and the superintendent administratively modified that because by necessity, because of what we were dealing with. And so one of the benefits of having a regulation is that if that were part of the policy, then we wouldn't have been able to waive that in a timely manner because you can't change policies overnight. You can change regulations overnight, but it's rare, and generally, as Kevin said, he would inform you and get your okay before making any changes. And you don't write regulations, because you said they come with the CAPE policy or they come with our policy.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that we may modify, meaningfully because the model doesn't match the way we work, or we'll embellish or whatever.
Right.
So we do edit as necessary.
Right.
But again, that goes through, I mean, I think he served on the policy, like I said.
Millions ago, yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see
Very
you.
Good to
helpful.
see you all.
Good reminders.
Comments from the public?
Yeah, just go check.
Yes, thank you.
Before you go, I have a specific library policy question.
Yeah.
Just look through that.
Okay.
Those are only attending.
Okay, so I'm hearing no comments from the public. Future business items, you know that there was an information items, the enrollment for December 2025 was posted with our meeting materials. We will meet again in the new year on January 8th, will also be the superintendent's budget presentation. And then we roll into budget workshops on Thursday, January 15th, January 22nd, and the 29th. And those, just please note, start at 6 o'clock and not at 7 o'clock. Meeting adjourned at 9:00.